The Persnickety Witch of Fiddyment Creek by Gaye Pollinger, Chapter 3. Pearl's living room wasn't at all what I expected. Instead, I found it tastefully decorated with overstuffed furniture upholstered in cabbage rose chintz, a cranberry-colored velvet chase in the corner, a rocking chair with a comfy cushion, an upright piano and a bench, some framed pictures on top of the piano. Her hammered dulcimer was on a stand, and there was beautiful artwork, tatted doilies, and lots of oak pieces. She gave me time to wander around and examine things and to answer my questions. I touched several ebony and ivory keys of the piano. It was out of tune. And then I picked up a photograph of a man in a uniform and asked, "Is this Michael?" And she nodded that it was. When I got to the fireplace, I noticed the fine carving of the mantelpiece, vases of freshly cut flowers, and little wooden figures placed here and there. "This owl," Pearl said, "is the very first piece that Michael ever whittled. It's a whistle." And she put it to her lips and blew. It sounded like a train whistle off in the distance. "And this man is his father. See how his legs hang over the mantel? Here's the tent of the circus collection. He used to tell me that he could look at a piece of wood and roll it over in his hands until it told him what he should whittle. See this piece here? I was always amazed at how he could get the pipe in the fellow's mouth and the grin just right and the twinkle of his eye." A portrait of Pearl and Willoughby when they were younger had its place of honor over the fireplace. They were quite a handsome couple. Michael had hand-carved the frame, and it was remarkable and perfect. It was painted from a picture taken on our wedding day at my parents' estate in Virginia. We had a beautiful outdoor wedding in the garden and a cake and champagne reception in the atrium and dancing in the ballroom. Pearl's face glowed as she remembered the day and told me about some of the prominent guests who attended. "Let's go open the trunk and see your things," Pearl suggested. She took me through the dining room where I noticed Michael's carving of the Last Supper, and I made a mental note to look at it closely later. And then we entered her bedroom. I quickly glanced around. It was large, spacious, and had oak hardwood floors covered by braided area rugs. It was feminine and dainty. The headboard had Pearl's initials, P.O.W., carved into it. A gorgeous antique dresser stood against one wall. An oak dressing vanity with a half-circle mirror was angled in one corner, and it had a round stool. An exquisite oak camelback trunk stood at the foot of the bed, and it was covered with a lacy throw. Pearl handed me a pillow and said, "Here, sit on this." And I dropped it to the floor and did as I was told. She pulled the vanity stool over close to the trunk and opened the lid before she sat. The lace throw slid to the floor, and I could see the leather handles, tin panels, and cast iron bolts and latches. The chest was stuffed full with trinkets and treasures. "Everything in here belongs to you," Pearl said as she picked up a pink crocheted blanket and held it close to her face. A familiar fragrance arose from the trunk. "Pearl," I began, "I think I can smell my mother's fragrance. Is it here?" "I don't remember," Pearl said, "but if it is, it'll be closer to the bottom." Pearl handed the blanket to me, and I moved my hands over its softness and examined the white satin border. It was lovely. Next were my white christening dress, bonnet, and tiny white shoes. Various other baby outfits had been lovingly wrapped in tissue paper and were stacked with an occasional rattle or baby toy tucked in between. Pearl and I oohed and ahed over each item. They had kept their colors nicely after being tucked away for all these years. Underneath the clothing, blankets, and soft items were books and squares to a wedding ring quilt, photo albums, and a wooden plaque with the words "Lucille, bringer of light," darling stuffed animals, toys, Raggedy Ann and Andy, a book of Mother's handwritten recipes, and Michael's whittles. One book in particular captured my attention. It was The First Year of Lucille Olivia Baldwin, and my mother had written it almost every day. It had a page delegated for guests and their gifts, another for first word, first step, first birthday, and potty training first, a page with an envelope for a locket of hair, mine was blonde and very wavy, a page for likes and dislikes, and a page for favorites. It also listed weights and measures, and every now and then I would say, "Oh, Pearl, look what she wrote." And she would say something appropriate, such as, "Oh my, how sweet," and "Oh yes, I remember that." I couldn't wait to delve into the photo albums and other miscellaneous things toward the bottom, but it was getting late, and Pearl suggested that I take a few of the things home to show Tom and the children, and bring Tom over another time to actually take the trunk. It was heavy enough empty. As I stood to gather my things and embrace this wonderful Persnickety Witch, I realized that I was emotionally spent. Pearl had bent over and was carefully looking for something in the trunk, and at last she stood with a smile on her face and she handed me a bottle of Chanel No. 5. Around it was a little gold chain. Hanging from the chain was a baby's ring. The fragrance! She wore Chanel! I whispered excitedly, but what's this?" as I touched the tiny ring. "That's your baby ring, my dear. I gave it to you the day you were christened." Pearl told me that she didn't want to lose anything that day years ago when she gathered my possessions, and that was the only way she could think of to remove the bottle of perfume and the baby jewelry so that the chain didn't get all tangled. We walked out onto the porch together and carefully navigated the stairs. My head and arms were loaded with things from my past, and we carefully placed the treasures in the back seat of the T-Bird. I got in, waved goodbye, and drove down the gravel driveway. It was a clear night with a star-studded sky and a crescent moon peeking from just behind the weeping willow tree. 2 shooting stars traveled through the night sky, one chasing the other. They reminded me of Pearl and me and our chance meeting. As Pearl was getting ready for bed, the telephone rang. "Aunt Pearl, how are you doing?" said a deep bass voice. "Michael, it's so nice to hear from you. How are things in Chicago?" Pearl asked, and he brought her up to date on family things and the newest work project. His twin children, a boy and a girl, who looked nothing alike, the son looked like his mother and the daughter looked like her father, had just turned 16. They were named after their parents, so the girl was named Abigail Olivia after Gayle, and she shared Pearl's middle name, and the boy was Michael Gabriel. The twins had decided when they were 5 and entering kindergarten that they wanted to be called Abby and Gabby, and had stood before Michael and Gayle to give their mom and dad instructions. "We want you to call us Abby and Gabby, not Abigail and Michael, because we want to have rhyming names," Abby said before Gabby interrupted. "And we don't want you to dress us alike either, and even put us in the same color or anything like that. That would be yucky," he said as he wrinkled his nose, putting much emphasis on the yucky. Then the 4 of them shook hands to make it official. Michael and Gayle somehow managed to keep straight faces and stifle their giggles until the twins marched out of the room, and then there were gales of laughter. Brothers and sisters are often very close, but the twins knew what each other was thinking, and they were there for each other emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Growing up all too fast, they were now juniors in high school and very anxious to get their driver's licenses. "Aunt Pearl! Aunt Pearl!" Abby was giggling and yelling toward the phone. Finally, Michael handed it to her. "We want to thank you for the gold bars. What a cool present!" And then Gabby yelled with her, "Thank you!" And they were gone. Pearl laughed and knew she wouldn't be able to get a word in edgewise when Abby and Gabby were around, and she finally said, You're so welcome, kiddles." She paused for just a moment, and then said, "I have so much to tell you, Michael. I kept bumping into Lucy last week, first in her yard and then outside, the general store, and then finally Pearl's gate. So I knew that she was curious about the Persnickety Witch. We chatted a little, and I invited her to come over this evening. We opened the trunk." "Oh, wow. You did? How did that go?" he asked. "I think very well. She now knows that I'm not a witch, and she learned some things about her mother." We laughed about the witch confusion until our sides hurt. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And remember, the Principal Grandma says, you'll never know what comes next until you turn the page.